My upbringing was always what we would typically term the middle class South Indian atmosphere. The focus was always academics and education. My grandmother wanted me to have what she couldn't when she was growing up, as in her own knowing that I may regret that in the future if I didn't do it now. You always have to keep yourself updated. You always have to push your comfort zone, always look for things that you're not aware of. If I say yes, if I can't deliver, I at least follow up on it to make sure that they are aware that I can't do it for a certain reason. Learning from your failures, there's no equivalent. No college degree is going to wait for that.
Welcome to the Indianness Podcast, a show about leaders of Indian origin who have overcome challenges and worked with dedication to ultimately achieve success. By telling the stories of the defining milestones in their journeys, we hope to inspire others to learn how they too can succeed in their pursuits. Here's your host, Sanjay Puri.
Welcome to the Indianness Podcast, where we share stories of success from leaders and change makers of Indian origin. I get asked all the time, how come Indians have been so successful around the globe? And my response always is, let's talk to the leaders and the change makers around the world. So I'm your host, Sanjay Puri, and today I'm thrilled to have with us Harini Gopalakrishnan, CTO for Life Sciences at Snowflake. Harini has carved an impressive path in healthcare technology from her early days in India to working across Sweden, Canada, and the US. She has consistently pushed the boundaries of what's possible at the intersection of healthcare and technology. Welcome to the show, Harini.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Harini, we have a global audience, and so for them, this is informative, but also a learning lesson in terms of your experiences. So to do that, can you take us back to right at the beginning as to where did your journey begin? Tell us where you were born. Tell us a little bit about your parents.
Sure. Thanks. So I grew up in the south of India. I grew up in Chennai, Madras, back then when it was called, when I grew up, it was still Madras. But I was born in a village where my mother hailed from in Kerala. It was called Tarur, not to be confused with Sashi Tarur, but it was a separate, another village by the same name in the district called Palakkad. So I share bilingual roots. I speak both Tamil and Malayalam, and in our family, we always spoke a mixture of both. However, my upbringing was always what we would typically term the middle class South Indian atmosphere. The focus was always academics and education. There was no difference between being born a girl or a boy. You always had academics as your priority. My father himself was a chartered accountant, and my mother was a commerce graduate, so she was working in a bank. However, what's interesting is I grew up, what we call a joint family. So I had my father's parents, with my grandparents living with us, and my grandparents' sister and her husband living with us. And all of them were working, which means my grandmother was working, my grandmother's sister was working. So pretty much when I used to come back from school, the only person at home used to be my great grandmother because everybody else had gone to work. So all my life, I always thought that that was the way to go. You have to finish school and get a job. And so it was a very grounded atmosphere where you always felt that education and getting a job was some of the things that you had to do, was a rite of passage.
Oh, fantastic. So you're born obviously in Kerala, but then you moved to Chennai, right?
No, my parents were living in Chennai. I just was born in Kerala
there,
because
and then,
my maternal grandparents lived there. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in Chennai. Dad was a CA, chartered accountant.
Yes.
And any memories of your grandparents?
Yeah, a lot. In fact, yeah, go ahead.
No, please tell us a little bit about just very briefly, what were your memories of your grandparents?
As I said, both sides, right? Especially starting with my paternal grandparents because I live with them in Chennai. In fact, I had more interaction with them than my parents growing up because you remember a typical 80s, 90s childhood in South India, both parents working, you had your grandparents receiving you back home. Yeah. So my grandmother was, as I said, working initially when I was born. And soon after my brother was born, she took her voluntary retirement. So somebody is there at home besides my great grandmother. So all my childhood interactions are lovely interactions and memories of my grandmother. It's, I think, an idyllic childhood, which I don't know if this generation gets to see, where you come back from school, you hear mythological stories, you watch movies together. There is always a lesson about moral values or something, but it's not preachy. It just happens in your day-to-day interaction. There's always an advice or a statement of what's good or what's wrong. There is always a clear focus. My grandmother wanted me to have what she couldn't when she was growing up, as in her own life back then. So she was particular that I learned some form of music, classical music or Carnatic music, as we had in South. I couldn't sing. She tried to put me in singing lessons. I couldn't. So the teacher tried. Apparently, I didn't have the vocal cords. So I learned Veena, which back then when I was growing up, this is a memory I'll never forget, because I hated going to these classes, singing classes or Veena classes. My fingers used to hurt. I didn't enjoy the point of it. My grandmother insisted that I go because she felt she never had the opportunity. So she wanted me to go, right? So she used to drag me to those classes. Much later now, I think that grounding, I'm really happy I did that, because I didn't become a professional player. I can't, not even close to it. But now I can pick up an instrument, a string instrument like a veena, and play. And I want to learn now on my own. But if I didn't have the basics, it would have been all the more harder. So I think those lessons that they instill in you in your childhood have carried on. And I keep discovering the essence of it now. So I would say all those interactions were amazing. Just the ability that they were very progressive, put education first, made you want to have the best of abilities to learn things, knowing that I may regret that in the future if I didn't do it now. Put some discipline in when you get up, what you do after you get up, when you study, and but make sure you also go out and play. So that was my paternal side. And my maternal side is even more idyllic, because it was vacation time. I always met them during summer vacation. So there was no school. So it was always nice to go there, be with your cousins and hang out. And that's a different environment in the village compared to the city. But I would always say that the grounding I had with my grandparents is something that I still carry, I still cherish today. It's something that I can't think of any other way that I would have had those lessons.
Oh, fantastic. The role of grandparents doesn't get talked about, especially in the US, as much. They play a very, very important role. I want to pick up, I want to pick up on a point you just mentioned, again, for our listeners, Harini. You talked about grandmother forced you to pick up the veena and gave you some foundation, etc. And that those things at that point were probably you hated it, it was hard, etc. But looking back, you have some basic foundational things to pick up other things. You could apply that in other aspects too, when we are taking on a new assignment, a new job, etc. Something that is unique. If you're a student or you're working in a corporate environment, is it important to make sure that the foundational knowledge is very good, even though it might be hard or painful? I mean, how do you kind of relate it to today? Because students are listening to you, corporate people are listening to you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that's paramount, and that's important, because it's a very changing world now. Back when my dad was working, as I said, he's a chartered accountant. He was working for a fertilizers, a private firm in Chennai. I think most of if people are watching, most of us in 80s and 90s, we would have had a parent who never changed job for 20, 25 years. They probably started and ended their career in the same company. That's not the case now. And in order for you to be successful in selling yourself, or to move to another job in today's world, you always have to keep yourself updated. You always have to push your comfort zone, always look for things that you're not aware of. Learning becomes more difficult as you grow older, right? That's why as a child, when parents push you for these classes, or when I'm glad my grandmother pushed me for a class, because as a child, I didn't appreciate the fact that I had to be somewhere and do something I never liked. But as a child, you grasp a lot of things much faster. As you become an adult, it's all the more difficult. But that's when the foundation of that you have to always stay curious, always to learn something new, becomes very important. And especially in today's world, it's all the more important, because you're not doing the same job that you did 1 year ago. And it's the technology, as you all well know, is changing so fast that you will get sold your job to a AI soon, from what you hear, if you don't stay ahead of the curve. I'm not saying that every job is going to be AI based, but it's always good to be ahead of the curve in terms of understanding what's coming, how can it be utilized. And in order for you to have that mindset to learn, you always need to not stay in your comfort zone and always push your boundaries into learning something. Probably you don't like it first.
Right. And also having a strong foundation is also important, right, Harini?
Agreed. For anything, right? Education is a good foundation. A lot of this generation might disagree because a lot of people might have a successful startup without going through a college career. If you ask me, did college help me? I would say life has helped me a lot more than my education in college. But the foundation that I have to be able to speak like this, to be able to connect the dots, right? To be even able to say that I'm learning something new. Like, for example, I did bioinformatics without any high school biology. I stopped biology at 10th and I did computer science and physics, chemistry, but I did my master's in bioinformatics. For me to do bioinformatics, if I didn't finish my 10th grade and I didn't have some foundation of biology, it would have been even more impossible. So foundation is paramount, but that's not the end of it. Some people can always learn on the job. Some people have a good business sense. They may be a good venture capitalist. They might be a good, find a new startup that can sell well. But what hits you in the long run, what will keep you going at 50 and 60 is what is those strong foundations that you can then capitalize on. You have to seed it, water it, sprout it. It has to take shape into a tree. But without the soil, there is never going to be a tree.
That's true. That's true. Just going back to again Chennai and the childhood. Dad was a chartered accountant. Was he very, very busy with his work? Was his job pretty intensive?
Yes, it was related. I mean, not in today's times. Compared to today's times, people didn't burn the midnight oil. They were there in the evenings for you, but relatively busy because there was always, I remember the budget sessions where they did burn the midnight oil. I would not see him for the whole day or night. But that's the advantage of growing up in a joint family. As a child, maybe the adults have a different experience of working in a joint family, but as a child, that's the beauty is you have so many people around you to care for you. You don't really miss one individual. You don't find the gap because there is always somebody to mentor you, advise you, make sure that you're staying on the right tracks. And if you have any need, they're there to take care of that. So, but yeah, that was busy in seasonal busy.
Yeah. So in that very nice extended family, who do you think was interacting with you most or influencing you most if you look back?
I think my grandmother for sure, my grandfather, because they were around. I think the more amazing personality would be my great grandmother, my grandmother's mom, because she got married probably back in those days at 12 or 13. And as I said, she used to be the only one at home, even though it was back then. Both her daughters were educated and she made sure that they were working. So that's how my grandmother was working. And she could speak and read 4 languages, which even back then, even though I was going to a convent, I couldn't. So she could read Tamil and Malayalam. And so she would read out stories for me from both these magazines, which I couldn't. I only spoke English. She could also manage English because she grew up in the British era. And she could muster some Hindi because, again, back then it was another language they had to learn. So I was very impressed. So I think that was always in my mind that my great grandmother could speak more, was more a polyglot than me. And it always kept me going. So they were my inspiration. Is always, I never had a doubt that I would study and go to work. It was never a second thought. And that was because of the people who surrounded me.
So you were learning from actually watching what was happening rather than what people were telling you, right, Harini?
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's because I don't think there was any engineer in my family before me. So it was not like I had advice on what I should do. Yeah.
Are there, when you look back, Harini, is there some specific things that your great grandmother told you that left a big impression on you?
I think it was integrity because what she said is a lot of, as I said, she used to read a lot of stories from the magazines. We used to get subscription, local vernacular. But I think the one thing that I remember, and my grandmother also, is that integrity. She said, if you said yes to something, make sure you do it. And, it was, again, not preachy. It was in practice. Like they would ask me to do something and I would say yes. And then I would be watching TV or play and forget it. And then they would follow up. And then the point was not whether I could do it or not. If I had difficulty, they would always step in. But it's just that the commitment, I said I will do it by, I would have promised them to hang the clothes or help them with a household task or something like that. And I would have not done. 1 hour later, the clothes might still be there. So one thing they always asked me is to stay true to what I said yes to. They said, if you're saying yes, make sure you do it. And that is something that I think, because of the way they imposed on it or told me about it, and the stories they used to associate with what happens when you say yes and what happens when you don't keep up your word, I think just grew in me. So now today at work, I think that's something that if I say yes, I at least, if I can't deliver, I at least follow up on it to make sure that they are aware that I can't do it for a certain reason. But it's always something that is now within me. It's almost like an obsession.
So to follow up on what great grandmother said, and following it to your current thing, is that if you say yes, deliver, or if not, then say no, that you cannot.
Or
Sometimes
go
is
back
it
and keep them updated. Yeah.
keep them updated, or
Yeah.
sometimes do you think it is better when you don't feel the capability? This is again for professionals, etc., to
Yeah.
say no. Is that what would you say to our listeners? Is it
So
okay?
that's not from my grandmother, but I was consulting in my first job, right, for a long time. So when consulting, the one thing that is very important is, one thing is your domain, but more importantly is the trust you build with your customers for whom you're consulting. You need to build that relationship. And what I've learned is that they trust people who say no more than people who say yes. It's very easy to earn trust. It's very easy to get people to like you by saying yes to everything, right? Agreeing to customer. But what you realize is when you say no and you give your reasons for a no, you earn the respect, not just the like. And then the trust is even more faster because they know that when you go back and say a yes, there is a confidence in the fact that you will deliver. So absolutely, if you can't, I always believe that to be a successful in your day-to-day life, to build respect, you should be able to take the stance and say no, and be able to articulate why. It's not your obstinacy. There is a legitimate reason. So being able to say that with conviction and putting the right arguments forward, I think goes a long way. And sometimes it has also been that you have to say no to a customer. You might have pressure from your management to say yes. But having that ability to have the spine or the backbone to say, for the right reasons, this is where the integrity comes to say, I have to say a no because it's impossible that we will meet this deadline. And I would rather have the trust of the customer than my internal management be upset with me. I think that calls may take time to get used to, but it always pays off. So being true to your word always pays off.
So I think you made a very, very important point that sometimes you get more respect by saying no than saying yes and not delivering. Maybe yes is a feel-good factor, but no is a long-term respect, and your credibility really goes up. So that's a great lesson, partly derived from your great-grandmother, partly, and partly from your consulting world. How were you, going back to Chennai, how were you in studies? What were you inclined towards?
I always felt science would be the calling. Now, I love history a lot because of the fact that, as I said, I've been hearing stories all my life, bedtime stories, lunchtime stories. So there's always a fixation for converting any historical aspect to a story, and not just about kings and queens or wars, but even about how my great grandmother lived back then, or how life was back then without electronics, without electricity. How tasks like grinding rice was an arduous one because of the fact that you have to harvest it, husk it, mill it, remove the shell and then powder it. It was a big thing. So just listening to that, I loved history. But for some reason, I think this again goes back to how all of us were raised. The option was either being a doctor or engineer in my family. I decided I will not be a chartered accountant because I saw how my uncles and father were burning midnight oil. So I thought it was easier to be a doctor or engineer. And I couldn't do medicine. I couldn't dissect stuff. So it was engineering. So I just was picked it because those were the options. I don't know if I was a science student by default. It was just something that I guess the society imposed on me, if I would.
Yeah, a process of elimination.
Yeah.
During school time, how about friendships? Besides, you were doing good in, well, you were doing Veena in music, etc. Were there friends that you were able to build in that environment?
Yeah. It was a very nice warm environment. Like used to talk to everybody because we used to get not all. I mean, I wasn't a very natural virtuoso musician or any sort. So learning was a learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to get, teacher used to be not so happy with my lack of practice or attention or my attempt at playing songs. So I used to get scolded. And I used to have a fellow student who would be sharing the same misery. So yeah, it was a good environment back then. I don't think I'm in touch with them anymore. Back then, we didn't have WhatsApp or email, so we never even thought to exchange phone numbers or anything. We used to meet at the class and then talk and then
Yeah.
disperse. School was also nice, but it was, I think thinking back, I guess I made more friends in undergrad, college, and grad, because I think in school there was always the pressure to make sure you get into a good college, make sure you make it somewhere. So you're always thinking of homework, lessons, finishing your 10th and 12th, public exams and stuff like that. So I would say college was more fun. You're more free than actually in school from a friendship perspective. Yeah.
Looking back, do you think you regret not making any more friends in school?
No, I think maybe I would have gone to a different school. Maybe that would have been different. I went to an all-girls school also, so it was a very convent setting. So I don't think I regret that. I think we
Okay.
maximized the environment that we were afforded to.
Yeah.
Maybe a non-convent school with less discipline would have been given me a different dynamics on how friendship could have happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about your transition to from school to undergrad. How was that, and what happened?
I think for me, it was a bit more interesting because I went from an all-girls school to suddenly an environment where we had girls and boys and more freedom and no uniforms and not much discipline. So I actually enjoyed that,
No
which I say,
nuns, no mothers, and no sisters.
sisters, yeah.
Yeah.
And where, we weren't terrified of being called to the principal. In fact, it was a more fun, relaxed atmosphere. So as I said, that dynamics was much more enjoyable. So I made a lot of friends. And I just realized that I didn't have any inhibition. I realized then going into college that I wasn't a shy person. I could talk to new people, boys and girls, or even seniors without any inhibition. And then we also hone a lot of skills on how to network, how to go and meet people who are not in the same discipline as you. Like they could be doing mechanical or they could be doing chemical. You go talk to them, form some bonds. Sometimes you're in the same bus and you form friendship. So I think that network dynamics is also something that you realized you should do. Whereas in school, you always talk to the people who sat in the bench or you shared your kindergarten with. So those things were fun. And also, you were an adult, close to being an adult. So you could travel everywhere more independently. You could watch movies alone. You could go to places without having a chaperone. So I really enjoyed the freedom. Yeah. It was fun.
One point I want to ask you, you said because a lot of our audience in many cases are introverts and successful introverts. You said you learned how to network and talk to other people, etc. Looking back, was there a skill in there or is it inherent in there? How do you think you're able to network? And you said you're able to talk to people from multi-disciplines. They could be mechanical, etc., seniors, or maybe not even from Tamil Nadu or outside. Were there people from beyond Tamil Nadu also there in the college?
Yeah.
So how were you able to do that? Coming from a strict Catholic to this environment?
I think some of it is innate.
Joint family?
Yes, I guess so, because you always had people coming in and out of your household. It's not the four people that you see every day. I mean, there is extended family that you live with, but you also had extended family to them. Like there would always be another uncle staying over for a month or something. So you always started a conversation. You always wanted to know where they came from. Like one of them would have come from Calcutta, and then you're like, oh, what is Calcutta like? What language do they speak? What do they do there? So you always ask these questions. So I think I was just a curious person. I always wanted to know. And back then, remember, it wasn't like a Google. You can't just Google and say, hey, what is Calcutta like, right? So you always had to get it from another person who has had that experience. So that I always was curious. That's why I was curious about how my great grandmother lived in Kerala, or how things were under the Britishers, or what could they eat and what was different. I think that help is not talking for the sake of talking. And what I find it weird, and sometimes in the corporate now, is you network, but it's a forced networking. You're in a networking event, but you know you're networking because you are looking for an outcome or a transaction. But back then, I was just talking because I was just curious about where they came from, what the city they came from looked like. But the same thing applied, I think, when I went to colleges. I was just curious which part of India this person came from, and or how was the schooling like there, or what is the temperature like there, or what is mechanical like. I was doing computer science. I wanted to know what would you study in mechanical engineering, right? Things like that. So always the curiosity eliminates the ice. It's an icebreaker, if I were to think of it now. So if you're an introvert, I think the pressure is because you don't know what to talk, or you don't know whether if you talk, you might say something that might be upsetting. I would say that if you genuinely have a question, most people are very interested to talk about their background or their past or some story they have. So if you go and approach them with a question that is truly something about what they do, their language, their state, you will see that the conversation flows. It's like talking to a friend. And I think that's what I've imbibed. Yeah.
So I think what you're saying to our listeners, especially the folks who sometimes struggle with, and I don't know if the word networking also is a little complicated word, just being, talking to people in large environments is just have a sense of curiosity, which is what you had because you had all these relatives come in from different places. You were curious. But do you think, Harini, also that when all these with different joint family members, etc., you had to learn to adjust, their timings, you had to be respectful, etc. So being flexible also was an important aspect for you?
Yeah, I think it's as a child you get away with a lot of that discipline. I think if you were to ask my somebody who's older who lived in that system, maybe was it too restrictive? It might be a different answer. Would I be now as an adult be able to live with 10 people, adjusting to their schedules? I think having lived in the West now, it's a bit difficult. I can see that side of the argument, but as a child, you are given a lot of leeway, which as an adult you won't get in a joint family. So I enjoyed the honeymoon phase of it. But yes, there were some timings like you can't just eat when you want, because there was a time when they had to make sure the kitchen was closed. They can't keep serving food whenever you show up. So there were some, maybe you're not hungry then, but you have to still eat. So there is some discipline aspect to it, but it's not. I think it would be more if you're an adult. As a child, you were had a bit more leeway. However, maybe it's not networking. Maybe some people are born curious. Even if I wasn't in a joint family, maybe I would have asked the questions to somebody who was visiting occasionally. But that's the advice I would say is don't think of it as a job. If you want to just talk to your neighbor, you want to know where they are, what they're doing. Most people are amenable. Sometimes speaking their language always helps. Like suppose I'm not a good Hindi speaker. I learned Hindi after coming to US, but because I had roommates who were from Mumbai. But it helped the bonding when I tried speaking their language, even if it was wrong, than just speaking English or something like that. So speaking that language, trying to show that you are interested in them always helps in any conversation building, in any network building. Yeah.
Showing you're interested in them, curiosity, and
Exactly.
showing you are genuinely interested in them. I think
Exactly.
that's a excellent point for our listeners who are looking, because networking or whatever you say in the corporate world is a very important aspect of what you do, just building relationships. Harini, how did you pick computer science as special, what you wanted to do? You could
I
have picked
think
something else too, right?
I guess it was just an easy entry barrier. Back when I went for counseling, it was an easy way to get into a job. India was opening up with all the MNCs, and computer
Okay.
jobs were easy. Yeah, so I should I followed the money like everybody else. But yeah, maybe I wasn't patient enough. But I like science a lot, but I knew that if you did physics or chemistry, you had to do a PhD. It was like years away. And like computer science, you might get a job in 4 years. So it's just a calculated
Yeah.
risk.
And the undergrad was in Chennai?
Yes.
Okay. And so you did the undergrad in 4 years. You had some great friendships, etc. Do you think academically it was a good experience for you? You learned a lot?
Actually, no. Maybe not as much as I should have, because computer science, I think, it's a good foundation. You learned, a lot of things I now can extrapolate is from that foundation. But I wasn't a programmer whiz or anything. And if you look at most of these guys who do startups who are founders, you don't have to go through an engineering degree in computer science to become a software entrepreneur. You just code. Coding is like one of those musical skills. You have it, you can
Or
go
you
program.
don't.
Or you don't, yeah. So it's not something you can learn, but you're never going to become the product builder. So, but I learned the foundations. That's all I could say about my undergrad. I had more fun than education. That's probably a good way to phrase it.
Had more fun than education for our listeners. That can also lead you to becoming CTO for life sciences in Snowflake.
No, I think the decisions you make after, because learning on the job, as I said, it's learning is not after school, undergrad. I think learning is a continuous process. It's not a 4-year degree certified. And that's what you realize is you learn a lot more on the job, especially soft skills, handling, politics or how intercompany dynamics. That's very important. You never learn that in an undergrad degree. No degree is going to teach you that. Learning from your projects, your failures that you have in assignments is very important. Learning from your client interactions. Those all are extremely valuable. So my advice would always be that when you start off, if you can go into the hardest project, the most impossible one, if you might, it's just like those Veena class that you hated. I hated my first 3 years of work life because I found that it was pointless, it was fruitless, I wasn't enjoying, it was escalation. But all of the way I handled it has paid off later. So back then, it didn't matter you were in a bad project because it was at very starting ages of your career. It's a marathon after a sprint, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's important. Learning on the job. So learning from your failures, there's no equivalent. No college degree is going to equate for that.
So a couple of points you said, and we want to come back to that also later. Very important points. One is take the hardest job first rather than push it off, because most people want to push that off. Either you want to procrastinate or you don't think you're ready. Maybe you're insecure. What if you fall on your face and your boss will not look at you? But what you're saying is take that on, because everything else after that is going to be smooth sailing. That I think is a very, very important.
And as a fledgling, nobody's going to judge you for your failure. It's easy to fall when you're a child than much older, right?
Yeah.
So when you're just starting off, okay, what happens if your project is a disaster? You're still looked up as maybe you're not going to get promoted in here, but it's okay in those days to even not get promoted or for 3-4 years, right? Thinking back, you're not even going to remember how long it took back then.
That's true. So, start with the hardest thing first. Harini, after you graduated, then what happened?
So I worked so I had a campus offer. So I was working in a software company called Cognizant for a year and a half. And it was one of those things where you get assigned a project. We built a lot of friends there too.
In Chennai?
In Chennai, luckily. So that was one of the best times because I'm still in touch with those friends. We still have a close relationship, but it's like going back to college, but now you're getting paid for it. So I suddenly had a monthly salary, money. You didn't have to. I was living with my parents still, so no rental income or nothing. So it was just like going to college, but you had money to spend and you didn't know what to do with it. So it was fun, and we were all from the group. We all had joined into the campus. We were all campus plays, so we were all the same age, just out of college, the same mindset. So it was fun. We formed another group. But it was tough. The work life was tough. You learn what burning a midnight oil was. Sometimes you felt underappreciated, whether the work you do was even being visible and stuff like that. And then you dealt with, the first signs of corporate life, right? First signs of it. Like, okay, the first promotion cycle, your best friends, you're all hanging out, you're having fun. But then when the time comes to see who gets promoted, maybe there is a telephone, why that person versus this person, you realize all these things are important. You realize marketing is important. But the important thing for me personally was I realized I just didn't like tech alone. So I did computer science, but I always felt I did that because of money. My first lesson was maybe following the money isn't the right answer all the time. I realized that in 2 years at least, thankfully for myself. But so coding for
So
the sake of
if
coding was not my it.
is not so just to sorry to interrupt you, if following the money is not the right answer, then what is the right answer?
So, I mean, there is no right or wrong answer. It's just from what is right for you, what's right for somebody else,
Yeah.
right? I think following money, for me to sit here and talk to you with some comfort, I need money, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like I'm saying we follow the money, but
Mm,
that's not the only criteria. Because what I did is I quit my job. I
mm,
got promoted as well. So, but I still quit the job.
mm,
And I did my master's in bioinformatics in US. And back then, bioinformatics was a merging of biology and IT, and nobody knew what it was. But I just did it because it was using IT to solve a problem of I looking at DNA or protein and figuring out things with it, right? Analyzing it. Seemed very exciting because I could go back to science and also not waste my 4 years of undergrad in IT, right? So it was a good marriage. I
mm,
took it, but I had no idea whether I was going to get a job after that. So I don't know what the future was after that. So not when I was leaving, I think people were asking, it's like, why would you leave a job where you get a salary, where you were also promoted in
mm,
a year and a half, and there is some visible path to something that you don't know what your future is. I didn't have the answer then, but I just did it because I knew that this would just being in this comfort zone, getting the money and continuing with that probably would have not made me happy in the long run. And my aim with doing bioinformatics was not just learning, but it was that I will hopefully find a career for myself with it. So I always had the hope of finding a career. But money was not the first factor because if I picked money, I would have probably done a master's in computer science or something else like that. But I didn't want to repeat that mistake.
wow. So, as you said at that time, bioinformatics was early time for bioinformatics. Not too many people were doing it, and then you decided to do something that was non-traditional, and you also decided to come to the US. Uh, was anybody guiding you, suggesting to you, or this was all you?
No, it was no guidance because there was nobody else who had been an engineer in my family. If I had done chartered accounting, maybe I would have had no problems in following a career there.
Mm-hmm.
Going to US was a trend. Like everybody was leaving back then. My friends had all, so we all had
Mm.
written our GRE. So it was just,
Okay.
it was a no-brainer. But
Mm.
all of them had gone on to study computer science or follow up with a master's in the field they had done in undergrad. I think the only difference was that I, one important advice is that work helped me because if I had gone to do my master's right after undergrad, which was my
Mm.
also my original thinking initially until I got a job and I said, let me try this job. Um, I wasn't looking for one, but since I got it, I thought, let me try it. But if I'd gone for master's before the job, I would have probably ended up studying computer science. So having that work experience also gave me another experience to decide, data point to decide whether I wanted to do this in the future or not. And I decided, no, I want to do something else with it. So I'm
Mm.
really thankful about that decision of not going to study and working because that opened up the idea of doing something else different. So the reason I say that is sometimes you might think this is what you like, but once you go and work in that environment, you may realize this is not what you really want. So if you
Mm.
can get an on-the-job experience before deciding your next move, I would say do that because it always helps you, guide your decisions. And the only reason I took bioinformatics is because I always liked science a bit. And I said the only reason I didn't take biology is I didn't do dissection. And here I could go and not have to do dissection, but use tech. So I thought I'll give it a shot, just curiosity.
Mm. Very interesting. So, one of the things you said is uh, get some experience, more so to find out if this is something you're going to love for the rest of your life, or at least for the next few
Yeah,
years of your life, because these days, with how the world is moving, the rest of your life is very, very complicated. And you
exactly.
think that was an important inflection point in your life, working
Yeah,
at Cognizant, because if you hadn't, you would have gone for an MS in computer science, and then your path would have automatically gone down this path. So
exactly.
that's an important point. So, but that was taking a little bit of a chance also.
100%. And it took a long time to pay off. In the initial days after masters in bioinformatics, it was not like I had a $1 million job waiting, whereas people who had computer science would get into a tech company, right? It could get into a Google or a Microsoft back then, it's a very valuable thing. So you always question your choices too. You're like,
Did
maybe
you?
I should have just, yeah, I did too, because you didn't get a job out of immediately after, I got a job out of undergrad immediately. I didn't get a job out of masters immediately. So you're like, and whereas your colleague, friends who were doing masters in computer science were all getting, offers or interviews at least. And you're like, maybe you should have stuck to computer science. Maybe following your passion is not really a great idea. There are trying times, and it took me a long time. I did get a job. The firm I was interning hired me. Then I did go back to Cognizant. It was a very new division that was setting up for consulting in the domain, which means I could use, and they were looking at bioinformatics as a domain to consult. So I was like member number 3 in that group, only person with bioinformatics. Again, it was a risky thing because it was not the one that's bringing money to the company. So you're always like in the edge person.
A cost factor.
Exactly. But you stuck at it, you do it for years, and then, sometimes goes back to your, there are times when you question what you do is right or not. But for some reason, I just felt that I couldn't go back and just be another salesperson or another developer or another project manager. It's like, I always felt that there would be some meaning to what you do if I stuck it here. So you just have to bite your teeth through some of these tough times. And it pays off. I would say it pays off not because of what I'm doing now or what I'm doing today. It's only because then you know what your unique value proposition is. There would be a million software developers. There would be 100,000 project managers. But there would not be many people who would be a tech person who has worked in life sciences or who would have had a bioinformatics understanding, who would work in different companies. So I didn't think of it all this, back 20 years ago when I started. It's not all what I thought of. But now when I think of it, it makes sense, right? And each decision you make, you always want to craft a story that is unique to you, where you can differentiate yourself in the world. So I think that's a data point I was subconsciously looking for, but was not something that I could honestly say I planned it. And this is exactly what I wanted 20 years later. It's luck. There is chance. But like most people who believe in things, right? They say if you wait long enough, you might get what you
want. Some very interesting things you said. You didn't have a strategic plan. Now you said, there are a lot of programmers, and nothing against people wanting to be programmers, because that's a great career option also, or project managers, and that's a great career option. That was just something you didn't want to do for yourself.
What I'm saying is that what I didn't want. Second is, even if you're a programmer or a project manager, it's a great career option. I still think it doesn't. 2 years from now, probably I might end up saying, okay, maybe I have to be a project manager because that's where the salary is. There's nothing wrong in any job. It's just that even then you will still have to say what is different about you. How do you differentiate yourself as a developer? How do you differentiate yourself as a project manager compared to another project manager? So when you have a job description that is that is a lot in the market, then each of your positioning becomes all the more vital. Why are you better than the next candidate? So it's just something to think of. There's always maybe it's the $1 billion revenues you've handled as a project manager. For me, the unique value is the industries I have been in. That's all. So all I'm saying is, everybody, whatever profession, you have to find what is unique in your resume that would help you get the next job. And that's all. Nothing against any job profile.
Yeah. So what is unique? But Harini, you didn't have a strategic plan 20 years ago that this is what I was going to do. It was just maybe a little bit of gut instinct, little bit of luck, would you say?
Luck is important, hugely important. I don't think we should. I believe in that. I don't underestimate it, because there's always being about being at the right place at the right time. Sometimes that helps. So I'm not saying it's not something you cannot always plan your career to the T. You think this is what you will do. Sometimes things happen and it never pans out. Be ready for plan B, be patient. Those are all things that I think I would advise. When I say I didn't have a strategic plan, I didn't intend to be in a tech company 20 years ago. I thought maybe I'll be in pharma still. But here I am. Because I didn't think that tech and pharma would intersect ever as much as it did. So a lot of things change, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So, but be ready. And that's why saying being curious, always being a learner, always looking for the next curve helps you. And those things can be adapted to different times, but that foundation will always help you, guide you. And for me, my guiding principle was what is new, what can I learn, what can differentiate me or what excites me, not always the biggest salary. Yeah.
So learn to differentiate yourself. What's new? Always be learning, and what excites you. I think, Harini, that's what
Yeah.
your advice is to people. So you went back to Cognizant, and then what happened? How long you stayed there for some time?
Yeah, I stayed there for quite long, 10 years actually, built, and that was a good experience because I worked across pharma customers in consulting and across geographies. I traveled to Europe, I lived in Canada, I was in Sweden. So that also gave me the multi-country exposure, a lot of the client interaction skills, because as I said, it was a very niche group doing research informatics. And you were directly talking to customers who were PhDs on the other side, who were doing this for years. So you learn a lot from them, but what you learn from one customer, when you go and advise to the second customer, you become the advisor. So a lot of assimilation of things on the job. Love that part of the travel. You understand the sub differences between even different European country interactions. How do you talk with a German client is different from how you talk to a French client, from a Nordic client. All those subtle aspects of the job come across. So big learning. And after that, I went to the industry. I joined a pharma myself and had a great time building a product there. So it was a shift from services to being a customer.
Wow. So like I said, you've taken a lot of chances also. Well, I wouldn't say chances, but you grabbed some opportunities that came by.
Yes, moving. I think the other important thing is always living in another country helps you learn a lot more. So any opportunity, and US is great, but if you go to another country like Europe, it's also another experience because US, it's a bit more easier. You can speak English. There's a lot more Indian network, so you get assimilated much faster. Europe is a different challenge. I thought you'll pick up a lot of nuances on the culture and how to adapt. So traveling, living elsewhere, these are all things that will help you in the long run in career. It shapes the personality, it shapes how you talk to people. At the end of the day, every single day, more than what you know, it's how you interact with people and the trust that you build internally, externally, that matters in corporate. So, and living in different cultures gets you that.
That's an important point. So if you get an opportunity, take that opportunity to go outside your comfort zone in some ways, because being in the US or being, let's say, in New York City or Boston or wherever you are, it's a comfort zone. Different cultures, different way of working, languages, etc. They challenge you, but challenge you for the better is what you're saying, right?
Yep, exactly. And it's easier when you're single because you're not thinking of family, school, kids. So it's easy to do it and so if you get an opportunity when you're younger, never think twice. It's much easier than later when can get complicated. So yes, say yes. Don't worry about not knowing the language or not knowing the weather or things like that.
No, that's a very, very good point. Harini, we talked about the first job experience at Cognizant being a key inflection point. Is there another one or two other inflection points that you can just briefly mention? Is there anything that comes to your mind from your life standpoint?
I think probably leaving the industry. I was in so most of my colleagues, if they were to choose, they will say getting into a customer organization like a pharma would be a great end goal, right? So I did that, and it was a great journey. I learned a lot. I think after my undergrad, the next big learning was in my 3.5 years at Sanofi. We built a product that was awarded a Gartner Award for emerging tech. And what I realized is you could continue there. You could continue. I could retire there. And then again, it's a question of your comfort zone and moving out. What you miss in an industry is the ability to see across customers. What I found in consulting was I could go across customers. I had a breadth. I could get the trends. You could see the different problems. Whereas if you're in one customer, you see very well the problems there, but I missed the ability to make judgment calls because I didn't know what was happening
Yeah.
outside. So I wanted to build something, so I left that. I went to tech now. So where I am now, I think what I would say is, besides moving to the comfort zone, always look, never stay, if even a job or a company might be rewarding, always think twice. Are you learning from that job every single day? Is there opportunity for you to pick up more information? If not, either move your role, or look for some other ways to get that information, or change your job. It's always okay to come back to this if later, if you want to. So my big inflection point was making the decision to leave the industry and then take a risk again with going back to tech, and then not knowing what the tech world was. I wasn't bred in tech, so it was for me a big risk at that time.
Fantastic. So inflection point of moving away from product pharma to more of a tech. And a couple of things you said is for people that, are you learning something new every day? Are you getting better at your job? If not, change the role or change the company. That's, I think, a key message. Harini, and this is obviously something that is important. How has being of Indian origin has it influenced your leadership style in any way, or how?
I don't know, if I haven't analyzed it like that. I think my upbringing, my environment, as I said, my childhood, the questions you asked, I think that has influenced. Maybe that's the Indian origin, right? But being accommodative, right? You always, growing up in the environment, when you have guests, whether it's a good time or a bad time,
Bad
whether
time.
you always are putting the best face forward, right? You don't show
Mhm.
your discomfort to the person who comes in as a guest. The same thing at customer environment. You might have a personal struggle going on, but when you're in a meeting, it's the integrity. You are putting the best face forward. You're answering for them with the best possible smile in consulting, right, days. So those things, I think, have helped shape who you are. So that's why a lot of customers like working with Indians, with services company, because we never let our frustrations normally show at
Mhm.
work. I think that part has helped. The other part, I would say, once you're in corporate America, you have to play some games, play by the rules of the book, right, that the organization has set up. But for me, the biggest thing is the foundation of being able to say no, having the integrity, and then having the ability to smile, or be putting the work first, or taking care of the customer first, has probably been the things that have influenced me from an Indian origin.
So customer service, having strong
Yeah,
ethics
yeah.
and values that you bring, I think that's a common thing that a lot of our guests talk about. Uh, Has there been in your career, like with a lot of careers, not specific failure that happened that taught you any lessons? And this is again for our listeners who are aspiring to be Harini in the future.
As I said, my frustrations in after masters, right? I think that was a challenging time. I worked as a analyst for a in CRO company. Then the decision was to leave US and come back to India and join Cognizant in a member of 3-member team.
Mhm.
And would many people leave US to come back to India? At that time, it was a questionable choice. Now it's
Mhm.
not. Now I think going to India, everybody desires.
Yeah.
India's
Yeah.
booming.
Mhm.
But back in 2009, it wasn't that much of a logical decision to make. So
Mhm.
there were some failures, right? Maybe my decisions then would have been to push forward for a PhD. Maybe I should have stuck to going back to academics. But I was, like, as I said, my colleagues were all getting a job. I was like, no, I'm not going to spend more time in academia. Let me go find my way into corporate again. And that was a bit of luck. I had to find an opening, even if it was a 3-member team. There was a role. I was able to join. I was able to make my way with it. But not maybe it might have happened some other way. So I think the failure was there. If today's generation, if we had all this information, maybe I would have planned it a bit more. Maybe I would know exactly which companies to target after my master's. I wouldn't be so naive about, landing something as soon as I
Mhm.
finish, thinking that there would be farmers waiting to offer me a job.
Yeah.
So uh, I would be more planned. And I think that failure or that frustration for me was, if I think of it now, it was a lot. Now it seems nothing because it's years and you've moved
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But back then it was quite daunting. And I think one lesson from that is you just have to go through it, bear through it. And I didn't know, there's no other way. Sometimes it takes time for things to happen.
Yeah. Um, Finally, Harini, we talk a lot about mentorship in this podcast. Have there been some mentors in your journey, and they come in all shapes and sizes, etc. So briefly, any mentors or the role of mentors in your life?
Yes, I mean, in and along in different parts of your journey, like
Yeah,
growing up, your mentor, without knowing, my grandmother, I would definitely credit her because she's
yeah,
been my comfort zone.
of
But
course.
after that, work-wise, I don't know if they were mentors who were looking to advice, but they were people who, when you were doubting yourself whether this is the right track, you had people say, stick with it, you will find a path. People who are just supporting you with a great advice, not a career advice, not to say that I will help you get the next job, but people saying that, no, you made a
Yeah.
decision. This is a good choice. You have it in you, positive reinforcement. So I had mentorship during my master's also from
Mhm.
professors. And then during job, it's a very tough time. So I had a customer who was my good mentor, who I still go to whenever I'm in doubt about whether I'm doing the right thing or why things aren't
Sure.
working the way I want. I think just retelling you, like there's an Indian story. It's like when Arjuna was very doubtful about his ability
Yeah,
to deliver, somebody need to give him the message saying, you can do it. This is you.
yeah.
Having that kind of a mentor who I still have, a couple of them helped. Whenever I'm in doubt, hearing that message, somebody else tell you can do it always helps you get through the tough times.
So I think the message is they come in all different
Yeah.
forms, grandparents, teachers, colleagues, even customers,
Yeah.
etc., and they
Yeah.
can help you across this journey. Harini, I have a zillion other questions, but maybe we'll have you back again at the end. We do have a lightning round of
You
questions,
sure?
just one word answers, a little fun to get to know you, for our listeners to get to know you a little bit. So you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's ask you, chai or coffee?
Uh, I love coffee, filter coffee. I'm South Indian.
Okay, yeah, that was an easy one.
Yes.
Remote work or in office?
Remote have become extremely lazy after COVID.
Oh my God, what about the real estate of your companies? But anyway, we won't go there.
Yeah, no, I think I know about that. It's nice when you go visit once in a while, but it's like Diwali once in a while. It's fine.
Okay. Strategy or execution, Harini?
Strategy, yeah, always.
Strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Data or intuition?
Intuition, 100%. I believe
Intuition.
because I have no data for some decisions I made. Intuition.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Harini, books or podcasts?
Books because I like to read on my own. Mm,
Cool.
yeah.
Morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Fiction or non-fiction?
Fiction.
Fiction. We asked this question to everyone because that's what this podcast is. Your very brief definition of Indianness.
I think it's a hybrid culture, being able to stay rooted to your culture, your grounding, your history, but look at Western values and work with it, right? That blending, seamless blending. I think that is Indianness, not letting go of your roots to grab the future.
Seamless blending, hybrid culture. I like that. Harini, one one person, can't be two, who's been the most influential in your journey.
I think this point, I will have to credit my grandmother for things
I
that I
thought
think,
so.
yeah,
Mhm.
for not, sometimes it's just not money, as I said. So it's all the values that I think today I have, which wasn't planned, which wasn't like, but I owe it to her.
Yeah. Finally, for our audience, if and you've given some incredible piece of advices, but any actionable advice from your experience to young people who are looking at you and saying, "Yeah, I want to be like Harini."
I think it's impossible to say we want to be like somebody. We always take a successful person.
Mm,
I mean, I'm not thinking I'm successful, but I have goals I look at really successful people. I think the important point is see who you resonate with. It's not just the money, it's not your title, it's not your job. It's not because if Steve Jobs found Apple, you want to be Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had a passion to build something. So find what your passion is, right? And if that turns out to be successful enterprise, good luck, great. But if not, it's still okay. So I think the only advice is look at what interests you, because if you follow the money, at some point you will get bored. And in this generation, it is very, I feel it's more important because it's easy to fall into the trap. Everybody could be millionaires by 40. Sometimes you in the right place, right time, right startup, you get the money. But then what keeps you going after? It's very difficult to identify. So follow your passion is my advice if you can afford to. Some people need money for sure.
Yeah. So follow your passion, I think, is what you're saying. Thank you so much, Harini, for sharing your inspiring journey. Really, your story really exemplifies how Indian professionals are shaping the future globally. And to our listeners, remember that you can find more information about Harini's work and the Indianness community on our website. And until next time, this is Sanjay Puri signing off. Please stay tuned for future episodes and review and share these podcasts. Thank you so much, Harini. This was fabulous. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.